John, thank you. Hey, everybody. It's so amazing to be in Manistee. I'm excited to be here. We have had a great West Coast trip all the way up. We're in Ottawa County, Newaygo County. Amazing Democrats all over the place. And so I'm Harper, Democratic candidate for United States Senate, and those of you most of you I've never met. So I'll sort of run some things down of what you may or may not know about me. First thing you should know is that I am not a career politician, which in this very moment in time I think is a very good thing. But I am a few things. Number one, I'm a proud cancer survivor, so I'm glad that happened. Number two, I am the son of two amazing physicians. My mother was one of the first African-American female anesthesiologists in the country. She's 86 years old. She lives with myself and my son in Detroit, and she's an amazing, inspiring woman. And my father has passed on, but he was a psychiatrist and worked in mental health, and he worked in the prison system doing mental health work. And I'm also a 32-year union member who was elected to the national board of my union to fight for fair contracts. I'm a 7-year small business owner in downtown Detroit. I just went to Port Brew around the corner because every place I go, I like to go to little local coffee shops because I own a coffee shop in Detroit and I want to support local coffee shops. And when I think about small businesses in so many ways are the engines of our economies, particularly in communities like this, particularly in neighborhoods. And so when we think about what we're going to support when it comes to economic development, at least my lens or my filter runs through the small business entrepreneurial economy. And so a lot of us, if you call yourself a progressive, I call myself a progressive, many progressives, we leave small business off the table oftentimes. We have to talk about job creation, living wage, and et cetera. And so I'm also a graduate of Brown University. I studied economics and sociology. I graduated as valedictorian. I then went on to Harvard Law School, and I also got my master's at Harvard from the John F. Kennedy School of Government. At Harvard, I met a guy who was about 7 years older than me. I looked up to him, not just because he's taller than me. He had a sense of purpose. He was almost 30. I was in my early 20s, and I said, hey, man, we played basketball together. His name was Barack Obama, and we became good friends. And he asked me to help him win a U.S. Senate seat at one point, and then he asked me to go and help him get the presidential nomination and win the presidency. And then he appointed me to the President's Cancer Panel in 2011, where I served working with then Vice President Biden's moonshot to cancer and the National Institute of Health, and we were able to really shepherd novel cancer research and things. And if anybody ever talks about representation not mattering, just use this as an example. We were able to really push forward the cellular-based cancer therapies that you're seeing save lives right now today. And as soon as the 45th president was elected, that person came in and wiped out that entire body. And so I hasten to think about how many lives have not been saved because of the research that was not done because that person occupied the White House for that term of time. And very proud of the work that we did. And so when we think about where we are, so many folks are hurting. And I'm running because I want to represent people. Remember, the first three words of the Michigan Constitution, the first three words of the U.S. Constitution are "we the people." And this candidacy has been about representing people, going everywhere, meeting people where they are. Last week was a very heavy week for me because on the east side of Detroit, and I'm not sure if you saw this, there were 2 young people who were shot and killed, and 19 other folks shot. I went to that street. It was a street called Rossini, and met with many of the families along that street and got a chance to talk about a lot of the trauma that they experienced. They left those bodies on the street for over 8 hours. And you know, they were claiming that they were trying to investigate what happened. That's why they kept going outside saying, hey, please cover this up, but they wouldn't cover up the bodies. It was just really a traumatic, horrific situation for these families. And so when we think about where we are right now, we think about the education crisis, the healthcare crisis. What are some of the things that we want to fight to get done? Number one, we got to address our healthcare we in many ways, and I talk about my mom with my mom all the time about this. When she became a doctor, healthcare was nonprofit, and we've allowed for-profit private equity to move into healthcare. That we truly don't have a healthcare system; we have a sick care system. And when we think about the incentive-based, there's really no incentive for you to get off of Lipitor. Because at the end of the day, there's a profit motive for you to stay on Lipitor. Big Pharma spent over $375 million on elections in 2022. They're on pace to spend over $400 million in 2024. And so that leads me to one of the things that we have to target. So we have to target an end, and no other candidate is talking about this. I don't know why, because I truly believe it's the main scourge of our democracy, and that's end Citizens United. When we think about the reaction, in my opinion, many people think the reaction to the Obama presidency was the Tea Party. I think the true reaction was Citizens United in 2010. And we're seeing a decade and a half in, we're seeing how it's destroying our democracy. We're seeing that if we're going to allow unlimited dark money to reign into our politics and impact outcomes, if we're going to see how super PACs and very large special interests are even out there bragging. There's an ad that just came out, I don't know if you saw it the other day, that AIPAC said that 90 out of their 90 back candidates have won their primaries. 90 out of 90. They targeted Jamal Bowman in New York, and they were able to defeat him. They offered me $20 million, $10 million in hard, $10 million in dark, to drop out of the Senate race and target Rashida Tlaib. I turned them down. It's the same strategy. It's the same thing that they did to target Jamal Bowman. They're targeting Cori Bush in Missouri. They targeted Summer Lee. And so when we think about this, I don't blame them. I don't, because the system is set up to allow them to use dollars to actually target candidates. And so if they have a special interest that they want to promote, that's fine, right? We need to change the system so it disallows those types of offers to even be made. And that's why ending Citizens United is a big piece for me. And so we got to get health care done. We got to get women's reproductive freedom, women's reproductive rights done. How do we get this done? And then we also have to get the John Lewis Voting Rights and Advancement Act passed. We just saw this disastrous verdict from this Supreme Court from 2 weeks ago that literally said it was okay to draw borders in a district and gerrymander a district like a jigsaw puzzle. They literally X'd out and disenfranchised 30,000 African-American votes in South Carolina. Look up the ruling. It is horrific. And so when we think about what we have to get done, we also have to pass the PRO Act to support our unions. Again, this Supreme Court just targeted National Labor Relations Board, targeted OSHA, saying you don't have jurisdiction. We have to undergird literally government bodies that are regulatory bodies. The EPA is being gutted right before our eyes. And being in a place that is so beautiful, I'll tell you this, I'm the only Senate candidate here in Michigan, and I'm sad to say, I can tell you why, but I'm the only one that's calling for shutdown of Line 5. There's already been 31 breaches of Line 5, and I wish there were more candidates that were talking about it, but Enbridge spends a lot of money on elections. And they already poisoned the Kalamazoo River in 2010. And I'm also the only candidate that's talking about disallowing the expansion of Camp Grayling, one of the #1 PFAS polluters in our state. The Department of Defense wants to expand Camp Grayling. I want to fight against that expansion into the hunting preserve around Grayling. Most of the people in that area, even if they are really pro-military, do not want Camp Grayling to expand. They don't want the runway extended so that bigger jets and bigger military jets can land there. They don't want it. We're going to fight it. We're going to stop it. And part of that has to do, I'm not going to rubber stamp the NDAA, which is the National Defense Authorization Act. I'll support Barbara Lee and Mark Pocan's bill. It was the people over the Pentagon for a $100 billion reduction in spending in military. I'm the only Senate candidate that talks about it that way. So with that, what do we have to end? We have to end Citizens United. We have to end the filibuster. We're going to get none of that done. We have to expand the Supreme Court, and we also have to end mass incarceration. We're 5% of the world's population. We hold over 25% of the world's inmates. It's one of the most inefficient spending of taxpayer dollars. We know that we get $8 back for every dollar we spend in early childhood education. We get that paid back to us by people who are productive members of society paying into the tax base, and folks we ultimately don't have to lock up. We have to spend more on early childhood education and education throughout, and certainly less on prisons and locking folks up. And so with that, I've laid out a lot relatively quickly. I want to open it up to comments, questions, etc., because I'd rather hear from what's happening in Manistee. I want to say a big shout out to Tony Trucks, who's a friend of mine from entertainment. This is her dad. She's phenomenal. I've known her for years and years and years. I knew she was from Michigan. I didn't know she was from Manistee, though. So she's fantastic, and a big shout out there. But let's hear. I want to hear from you guys about what you want out of your next U.S. Senator, and why is this really important? Let me just say this: this is the first truly open U.S. Senate seat in Michigan in almost 2.5 decades. This is an open seat that we have to take very seriously who gets in that seat and what they're going to fight for. And so with that, I'll send it. Oh, go ahead. We have another mic. Look at that.
Just
high tech in Manistee. Questions or comments?
Obviously, you've done such a great job.
Yeah,
Hold on a minute. Here we go.
Okay, here we go.
Glenn Lottie's going to talk.
Hi, I'm Glenn Lottie.
Hey, Glenn.
You're running for a seat that was Debbie Stavenow's.
Yes.
All right. Well, Debbie Stabenow was very active in supporting farmers
Yes.
and farming programs and whatnot. On your brochure, I don't see that mentioned. How are you going to interact with the farmers? I think that's a wonderful voting block if you can interact with them and follow through on those programs.
Sure.
She did farm to school lunch programs and everything like that, and which the Republicans like to do away with. But
Yeah.
I think for your own benefit, you should really interact with the farming community.
Thanks, Glenn. So I do a great deal, and I'll break that down real quick. So my grandfather had it. I was born in Iowa. My grandfather had an 88-acre farm in Iowa, and I spent a lot of time. And so I've spent a lot of time during this campaign with farmers. At the end of the day, the farming community is very important to me. Yesterday, I was with a farmer named Brian. He has a blueberry farm called Bumbleberry Acres, and we talked a great deal about a number of things. And so a couple of things, he asked me if I would serve on the Ag Committee. I would request to be on the Ag Committee because Debbie Stabenow has had a huge presence on that committee, and that would be very realistic because as a junior senator, you usually don't get your choice, but people aren't tripping over themselves to be on the Ag Committee. So I would be able to get on that committee. That's number one. So I would serve on that committee. Number two, a couple things I'd want to get done. Number one, right to repair. A lot of our farmers I talk to all the time, they're very upset. We have 54,000 farms in Michigan. About 50,000 are small family farms. 4,000 are kind of big ag farms. The big ag, it's not really going to be my focus. I'm going to be focused more on the smaller family farm that really get crushed by not having a right to repair their equipment. They could mortgage their house to get this big, beautiful piece of equipment, but they would get charged 10, 15, 20,000 just to send it back. And if they touch this piece of equipment, they lose their warranty, which would be catastrophic. And so they need a right to repair their equipment, and it has to happen, or they have to be subsidized for their ability to send the equipment back and have it sent back to them. And so these are things that we talked about. The other thing that we talked about is this protecting. There's a blueberry farmer that I met who's having to sell her farm because she feels that the government doesn't protect her from Peru-based blueberries, etc., coming in and flooding the market. And so one thing that we talked about yesterday that we could do is that during the main selling season, around late April through mid-September, you have an extremely high tariff for imports. So it supports our homegrown farmers. But the farmers say, hey, listen, we don't want to have a total zero drop of blueberries or whatever the produce is because we want people to be able to continue to consume. And so they're basically saying, protect us during our main selling season. And if we're able to do that, so we can get that done. And that's the type of thing that we'd want to promote. The other piece, and the reason why I want to serve on the committee, is SNAP benefits. The Republicans are targeting reduction in SNAP, and we're just talking about $6 a day, you guys. This is not a massive amount. And we can actually do something very smart, Glenn, that you kind of mentioned that we haven't done yet, which is we have a lot of farmers in Michigan that have produce that they sell. We also have a number of places in Michigan that some people call food deserts. I call it food apartheid because it's systemic more so than naturally occurring. And so we have these places that need fresh produce. Many of those communities are receiving SNAP benefits already. We have farmers that have produce that they need to sell, but they're price-wise, compared to big ag, they're paying 10x for fertilizer, and inflation is crushing them. We can support both, create a triple net win by bringing fresh produce to these communities, getting a place for these farmers to sell. They accept SNAP. payments and both win, right? And so we can be more efficient and effective and innovative in government. And I know that that sounds very oxymoronic, the federal government being innovative and effective and efficient, but we can bring this types of efficiencies. But we have to have the political will to do it. Why have we not had the political will to do that? Because most small family farmers don't have lobbyists. Most small family farmers don't have super PACs. Most small family farmers don't have special interest PACs that are writing checks. So therefore, they're not represented. With me, they'll be represented because I'm not taking any of that PAC money.
Other questions? Anybody? Yes, here we go.
Hi, I'm a public health dentist in the area. We have quite a issue in our area of access to care, and in rural Michigan there is quite an issue of access to care, not only dentistry but OB-GYN, and I love that you're in support of universal health care. I'm wondering if you have any plans to help increase access to care in northern Michigan, and how you plan to move forward with universal health care.
Sure. So I want to be very clear. First of all, when I say universal health care, I'm talking about single payer, Medicare for all. That has to get done. We don't want to confuse people when they say that. And it also includes mental health care, it includes vision, it includes dental, because all of these things are inextricably linked. And so I want to be clear about that. Unfortunately, my opponent in this race, she did not co-sponsor Medicare for all in the 117th, 118th Congress. I think that there is, we can talk about why, and if someone wants to ask that question. But the point is that we have to support that as a base layer of health care. Number two, when we talk about access, I've heard this all over the place about rural communities not having access, not feeling like they have access. And people keep talking about how divided we are. And I don't think we're as divided as we are disconnected, because that's the exact same thing I hear from urban communities where folks say, listen, 911's a joke. I need help and no one's here. Who's showing up? And so what we have to really focus on is immediacy of care and access. And so when we talk about that, that includes mobility, it includes location, it includes the ability to see a doctor, and also includes, I think, a really aggressive telehealth program. Because if we have a really aggressive telehealth program, you have accessibility, but you also have the ability, and then that leads us to what? It leads us to access to broadband. Right? It leads us to access. You have to have access to broadband to have access to telehealth. And there are so many rural communities that have been underinvested in that space. Right? And so all of these things start to line up and link up, because if you don't have one, it's almost like a domino piece falling. We have to line these things up, and we can do that. It's just about investing in what? Infrastructure here at home. We've been underinvesting in infrastructure, and by underinvesting in infrastructure, we're seeing the results of certain communities. We're almost picking winners and losers rather than creating a safety net for everybody, and that's really my focus. And so if we can do that, you can start opening up of smaller critical care facilities that work, right, that people can access. You can also create networks of mobility where folks can show up. A lot of the seniors have been telling me about the lack of mobility and access, right? And so those are the types of things we can solve through a universal health care model.
Absolutely. Hill, we got anybody else that wants to ask a question or make a comment? Where are we?
Oh, Glenn.
Okay, here you go.
I'm concerned my name's Gary Matt. Is this working? Yeah.
Yes.
I'm concerned with education. You mentioned earlier that the return that we get from investing in early education. What kind of programs do you envision for to support that effort? When my wife and I became educators a long, long time ago, we worked in Detroit Public Schools, by the way, for 34 years, both of us. There were federal programs to support teachers who wanted to go into rural communities and places like that and spend a number of times teaching, a number of years teaching. Teachers don't seem to have that kind of support anymore. And we have a situation here in our region where teachers don't earn enough money to even be able to afford a house. And there are communities that are beginning to build subsidized housing for people in education. So education needs a lot of support, in my view.
It absolutely does. And we here in Michigan, particularly the side of Michigan is the epicenter for stealing from public education, right? The DeVos family, your West Side folk, have led the charge in making sure that in Michigan we underinvest in education to the tune of $4 billion a year. And it's not right, and we can fix it. A couple different things we have to do. Number one, infrastructure spend. There are so many schools and so many school districts where we act as if putting double pane windows on a very dark old brick building is actually an upgrade. It's really just putting lipstick on a pig where nobody really wants to teach or learn. The other problem is, and this is one worse for you, Gary, where I actually visited a school where the security guards are more than the teachers. And you want to talk about something being upside down and wrong. And so there's no question we have to compensate teachers more. And then there's some different ways we can do it. Certainly just the bottom line of a paycheck. But you also can compensate and incentivize teachers by wiping out their student loan debt. Right? If you decide you want to teach, you shouldn't have to pay a lifetime debt because you had to earn extra education to be able to teach well. Right? You're actually benefiting society. So we can do a wipeout of student loans if you decide to go into that practice. And the longer you stay in, the more it gets reduced. And if you go to communities that are understaffed, we can even create newer and bigger incentives. But the point is that every year in Michigan we underspend to the tune of $4 billion on public education. And we have to change that. And we cannot allow the DeVos family to dictate education policy in this state, which we've allowed to happen. And we have to stand up to billionaires who basically want to privatize education just like they privatized health care. It's not right. We shouldn't let it happen, and we can't. The other piece is infrastructure spend. It goes back to the point I was making about schools and proper learning environments. Nobody wants to teach in a dark old building. Nobody wants to learn in a dark old building. We have underspent in terms of building new schools, particularly in communities where they're at or below the poverty line. If you look at Michigan across the state, zip codes that are at or below the poverty line, 91% of the school kids are 3 to 4 grades below in reading and writing and math. I mean, it's atrocious. And so you can draw a direct link between income in a community and math and reading scores, and also incarceration rates. And so poverty is being weaponized against communities, and that shouldn't happen, and we have to invest. The money is there, you guys. 100 people in this country, 100 senators, control the distribution of $7.2 trillion annually. The money's already there. The stuff I'm talking about has nothing. We don't need to raise taxes. We don't need more money. We need to spend it differently. That's all it is. It's reapportion how it's spent. That's it. So,
Folks,
There's a question over
I really wish we could, but Hill is on a tight schedule. I really apologize.
but can we hear her question? We didn't hear from this side.
All right, go ahead, Nancy.
Come on, Nancy.
Along with what you said about education, there's the issue of, in Michigan, a lot of teaching to the test. Now, I'm a former educator. I fortunately was in some elective courses, but if you have to be on page 32 by Thursday, that really cuts down. Teachers used to have freedom to be more spontaneous and do things in their classrooms. Private schools, yeah. Public school, in those core classes, you better be on page 32 by Tuesday.
That's right.
And that's something that I think that we need to address here in Michigan too, is that we need, we need innovation among teachers, and we need people to feel that they have the freedom to put their education to use and come up with good plans.
I hear this all the time, and thank you for that. The administrators and the principals, I ask them, and it's a simple question. I say, how come so many kids are being passed along that can't read? Because they say, Hill, if we don't hit a certain number of so-called moving on to the next grade, they're going to reduce our funding, which is the exact wrong incentive, right? If it's a school or a school district that needs more scaffolding, and because the students are underperforming and they need more support, they need more funding, not being threatened with less. And teaching to the test is incorrect. I believe it's incorrect. And so just think about this though real quick, and this is why I think diversity in the U.S. Senate is so important, and I'm not just talking about racial diversity. If I'm elected to the U.S. Senate, I'd be only one of 2 parents of an elementary age child in the entire Senate. So you want to know why these things aren't being talked about? Is because the representation isn't there of someone who's dealing with it right now. One of the big issues I have is my son told me one day that he was afraid to go to school because of the active shooter training that they make them do, right? And so if you're a senator and you don't have a child that's experiencing that, do you have an incentive to say, I'm going to stand up to the NRA and the gun lobby and solve the gun violence problem because we're actually saddling our kids with a mental health issue because we're not willing to stand up to gun violence? Yeah, amen. Right? Yeah. So those types of things I think are critical, and without question, giving teachers the ability to teach in a way that allows their students to learn and grow is important. So with that, I'd be the only active union member in the U.S. Senate. I'd be only one of 2 parents of a school-aged child. I'd be only a handful of a small business owner. And so this type of lived experience, and I'd also be one of very few, and so I point to it, and people ask me all the time, well, Hill, you've never been elected to office, what is your legislative experience? And I say, well, our current best senator had never been elected to office and never had legislative experience. She happened to teach and be a professor at my law school. Senator Elizabeth Warren, in my opinion, is our best senator, I'm just saying. And so we need more folks like that, more folks that actually didn't come up through the system and actually have more of an independent spirit and an independent mind. And you know, obviously, Senator Warnock had never been elected, and Senator John Ossoff had never been elected before. And so we have a lot, I think, a few, particularly in the Democratic Party, of folks that are more independent-minded and can sort of weave the way that way. And I think that's an important thing. And so with that, I want to say this, because one thing I like to end with is that, you know, this primary is truly a fight for us. That's why we're moving so fast and we're running so fast. But I truly believe when we fight, we win. So you guys say that when we fight, come on, when we fight, we win. When we fight, when we fight, we win. Please get people to turn out for the August 6th primary, because that sets us up for success in November. The more people we vote, the more people we energize, the more coalitions we bring together, it sets us up for success in November. And remember, we can't get out energy now or in November. Let's go get this. When we fight, we win. Thanks so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Hill Harper.
Thank you.
I've got to just say one last thing. Hill's on his way up to Benzie. He's going to be talking there, then he's going to Cadillac, then he's going to end up in Brighton today. He's the man on the move. All right? I am so proud to be a Democrat. I'm proud to be a Democrat because we have candidates that are worth fighting for, that are worth supporting. Here in Michigan, we have a great choice between 2 great candidates, and you just heard from one of them. So again, thank you all for being here. Be sure to vote. Vote in August, vote in November. Thank you.